thank you all for joining and giving me 20 minutes of your time. We're going to be talking a little bit about insights today. So, official title of the deck, which our wonderful marketing team came up with, Audience Insights that Power Marketing Strategy. Before we get into that, I want to talk about this insights topic. I've only worked in this glamorous world of media and advertising for 4 years, and I'll never forget my first week when a wonderful VP of Europe came to me and said, "Hey Peter, what we really need is insights." And I've got to be honest, it took me a while to answer this question. What is an insight, really? This is a tough question. And there's actually, if you Google this or use a search engine of your choice to look for this online, it's really not clear what an insight is. There's a lot of confusion about it. People talk about data plus analytics turned into patterns, something that gives you an aha moment. You'll know it when you see it. To me, an insight has to do three things. It has to be useful for decision making, else it's just trivia, right? So trivia is fun. There's entire board games based around it, but ultimately, unless it's useful for decision making, it's not really that usable by us as marketers. The second thing it has to be, I think, is believable yet non-obvious. You know, if you suddenly would try and convince your boss, your CMO, or your brand that 90% of our buyers of men's belts were women, that's just not believable. Yet saying non-obvious stuff doesn't really reinforce anything. So a nice balance between stuff that is believable so that we can translate it, yet stuff that's not non-obvious. And the third trait I think an insight has to have, and its goal really, is to help us build some sort of marketing intuition. As in, it reinforces challenges or deepens our current understanding of the world and our customers and our potential customers. So when I talk about insights, and certainly what we've been working on for the last couple of years now, is to help people solve for these. Help make smarter decisions, so useful decision making, they're believable but not just stating the obvious. And ultimately, the goal of insights is to help marketers to build marketing intuition so they can do a better job at reaching and influencing people. So I don't know how to make my slides animate. I'm having a bit of an issue with that. So if stuff comes up in odd orders, I apologize for that. Okay, so we've been trying to build this insights platform for 2 years now. I was set this task by our wonderful CEO who said, it'd be awesome if we could build a platform to solve for all these things that we think insights are. But there's a number of challenges. The first one, apparently there's 3 first priorities here, according to the way it's uploaded here. We've got more data than ever before, yet aggregate data hides reality. Right, so we have this problem whereby it's not, where we're all of a sudden able to accumulate data. We've accumulated more data in the last 2 years than we have in the entirety of human history that came before it. So we're not short of data, these observations of things that happen in the real world. But as soon as you start adding it up and aggregating it and looking at things like averages, you tend to hide the reality. And that's true on simple things like, when someone wants to know the average frequency that an individual has received an ad, it's 7. Okay, that 7 often hides the fact that 1 million people have seen the ad once and one person's seen the ad 1 million times. Right, so aggregate information often hides reality. And so any sort of insights platform is probably going to have all of the data. But which means really kind of try and find that needle in the haystack, you're going to have access to a hell of a lot of data. The second challenge is that predicting where an insight's going to be found, I don't think is possible. Trying to predict ahead of time, these are the 45,000 different ways of slicing and dicing our data, and one of those will have some sort of insight and we can highlight that to somebody. I just don't think that's a solvable problem. And so somehow any sort of insights platform not only has to have all the data, it needs to be somehow interactive. As in, people need to be able to dig into things, slice and dice things, really drill down, so that they can kind of find that aha moment, find that thing that's going to help them build marketing intuition. And the third thing that I think is true is that data without theory is about as useful as theory without data. To be useful in insights, with insights, the why matters. For that to be true, I think this is all about marketers. It's about marketers being able to apply their intuition and translate something, a pattern that you can find in the data, some sort of nugget, into something that's more generally true about a product, about a marketing campaign. And so being able to translate that, understanding the why, or come up with some sort of hypothesis on the why is really what's essential. So we need tools that marketers can use. This really results in something that I think needs to be interactive, user-friendly, and that can process billions of data points a second. right? So to build this mythical insights platform, I think you need to solve for all of these big challenges, and they're all tough. All right, let's see if these slides start working, behaving better. First, how do you go about doing that? How do you go about building one of these platforms? Well, this is a journey we've been on. We're very fortunate. We have a lot of this data. So we got an extensive first-party footprint. We provide unique insight into about 100 million web destinations. Everyone from kind of all the top-tier publishers are our partners, and we work with them very well there, right the way down to kind of blogs and so on and so forth with our free product Quantcast measure. We've been kind of trying to make sense of the internet for them for about 15 years now. So we're in a quite fortunate position of having access to a large proprietary data set. But then how do you make sense of that? The way that we do it is we build this live behavioral graph, so it's constantly changing. Every millisecond we're updating as people move around the internet. We enrich people moving around the internet with topic and sentiment information extracted from the pages. And in order to make it interactive, we had to build a proprietary database technology from the ground up. That was the only way we could get answers back fast enough to kind of our end users, so that we could allow them to really drill into data. To explain what I mean by that, I'm actually going to try and share my screen now, and we're going to jump into this one here. When I talk about making sense of the internet, what I really mean is allowing the computers to understand the internet. What we've got here on this screen, hopefully you can see this, I'm on my mouse over the top of it, is we've only got 8,000 points in here because that's the maximum amount that I can put in the visualization tool before it goes really, really slow. But every little blue dot here represents an individual URL. So some bleedingcool.com URL there. And its position in space here is dictated by two things. It's dictated by the content on the page. So we go and we crawl the entire internet, we extract the text from the pages, we use language processing, which does things like it works out which are the common words and removes those. The uncommon words, it passes through language models, the same kind of language models that are used for automatic translation and things, to allow computers to gain an understanding of language. And then it moves every URL into a position in space so that URLs that have similar content and concepts close to each other, and URLs that have completely different concepts and concepts kind of further apart. And we also kind of use user behavior, so users who visit the same URL around the same time, we can move close together, and URLs that never appear in similar positions in users' journey around the web further apart. All of this technology allows us to do is kind of associate some sort of position in space. In reality, it's across hundreds of dimensions. This model is actually across 768 dimensions, but our visual cortex can only handle 3, so we project it down to 3 dimensions to give the idea that what we're really doing with all this cool technology is trying to associate some coordinates with every individual URL. This is about allowing computers to kind of understand the internet. That's all we're doing, trying to make sense of the internet in terms of user behaviors and in terms of the topics and the sentiment of the pages. And as soon as computers have numbers associated with things, they can make sense of it. Computers are mathematical beasts, so they like to have numbers associated with it. And so we can kind of think of this as a big map of the internet. And so we spend millions of dollars every month just doing this, just to make sense of the internet based on the topics on the pages, stuff that we can extract in the same way humans extract it by reading, and then associating these coordinates. And you can kind of make sense of this somewhat, and you'll go around different spaces and you'll see that there's kind of similar-ish type URLs here. And then you can kind of think of user journeys as moving around this kind of space. Right, so the first step, as I say, is to make sense of the internet in a way that computers can understand, which means associating numbers with things, because then as soon as computers have numbers associated with things, they can do things like measure distances. And so they can say, well, these areas of the internet are really similar, whereas these are much further apart. And we can make predictive algorithms. Say people who hang around in this part of the internet are much more likely to go buy a product than people who hang around in this part of the internet. Okay, so step one, try and make sense of the internet in a way that a computer can understand. The next thing we have to do on top of that to build this mythical insights platform is to build query tools against it. So as a user, someone who's hunting for these insights to try and gain some sort of aha moment or gain some intuitive understanding, I need to interact with this. not just in terms of topic, but in terms of everything else as well. Overlaying my first party data with this. What's true about people who bought this product rather than this product? What about people who are in this geolocation? And so we had to build this thing we call Kamka, named after a famous mathematician. We had to invent our own query language here, right? So our own very own proprietary query language is very specific to the types of very fast intersections you want to be able to do. And because of all this, we can, I think there's a query here, which is, it's just running between these dates here. Oh, great, it's a demo and it's gone wrong already. It took about 5 seconds that time. It's usually about 2 seconds. What we're doing here is we're asking it to say, women in San Francisco, what domains they're looking at between these 2 dates. Right, so being able to answer that question is mathematically quite hard. To do that, we'll have to examine 43 billion data points, and we get through that in about 2 seconds. This is all about making it interactive and making it a general interactive query language, so we can swap out whatever we want and like drill in right the way down to kind of tiny kind of audiences and behaviors. But this, as cool as this is, and as mathematically and computer science type impressive this blows people away, and we have patented the hell out of this. As impressive as this is, it still doesn't build enough, it's not easy enough to use for marketers. I would love nothing more than to spend my life training marketers on tools like Python and data science and all this other kind of stuff. But unfortunately, not many marketers have taken me up on that offer. You can do some awesome stuff with this, don't get me wrong. We found that when we build segments of people who are reading content related to masks, this is actually a good predictor of where we have high coronavirus outbreaks at the moment. And we can see this day over day, week over week. All this kind of stuff is possible because we've made sense of the internet. We've applied time to it, geography to it, all this other kind of stuff. And we built interactive query tools that allow us to ask a whole host of different questions. But even given all of this, it's not enough. Because ultimately, unless we can build a platform which allows marketers to deepen their own understanding, challenge their own hypotheses, or kind of reinforce their beliefs, we've failed. And at the moment, up to this point, we've kind of failed because we've built tools that only data scientists can use. So what we've been working on more recently is putting this in the hands of marketers directly. So how can we take all of that intuitive understanding of the internet, put in a way that computers understand, awesome kind of interactive compute engines which allow us to ask it really, really complicated questions and get the answers back in seconds into something that marketers can use. And that's what we've got here. What I'm showing you here at the moment is something that our early adopter customers already have access to. If you're on our early adopter list, you see features here that you haven't got already. They will be coming within a matter of 2 weeks. But here I start with, okay, what audience do I want to understand? Do I want to start this with all the internet users that we have? Do I want to start with people, my existing customers, my first party data, people who bought one product, or people who kind of failed to check out? Or do I want to do it based on the content that people are looking at? So I'm going to start with an audience here for, let's do a Nintendo Switch. I'm a bit of a Nintendo Switch fan. It's very on brand for me as a CTO. Look at Nintendo Switch audience, and I'm going to look at it in the United States across the last 3 months or so. And very quickly, that Nintendo Switch audience, this is people who have hung out in the part of space which is associated with Nintendo Switch. What else is true about them? Okay, there's a male bias here, there's a younger bias here, and partly because of that, they're probably less well off. Look at other things they're looking at online. Of browsing interests, there's some stuff in there. We can really start drilling into kind of understand, again, where else in space they're hanging out. We can also, let's forget that for a second, let's get rid of Nintendo Switch. Let's say I'm doing a media plan. At the moment, I've got the entirety of the US population here, so there's about 980 million devices that we track. And then inside that, we can say, look, people are interested in, let's go family and parenting. General family and parenting. Kind of content online. We can see that, okay, there's a little bump here with these people who are likely to be parents. Slight female bias here. I can certainly say that my wife is a better mother than I am a father. And then you look here and you say, well, actually, this looks rubbish. Your first intuition, my first intuition when I said, look, there's a whole bunch of people who have no kids in the household who are looking at family and parenting content. That seems rubbish. This aggregate information at this point is telling me that this data can't be trusted. The nice thing that you can do with an interactive insights engine is you can say, well, hey, I actually want to drill into that. I'm going to look at the people who are looking at family and parenting content online, and but they don't have kids in the household. And quickly we can start to see, hey, there's clearly some grandparents in here, right? So there's clearly some grandparents who've probably got their grandkids for the weekend, and they're looking for what to do. Okay, that's interesting, right? If I'm suddenly starting to sell travel vouchers for the, or kids games at the A's, the Oakland A's or something, that might be an interesting nugget. I think, well, actually, there's a desperate to what to do with the kids, grandparents audience. That's interesting. But how about there's still this audience down here who are kind of the age where they may well have kids in this household, but they don't, and they're looking at family and parenting content online. Okay, let's drill into that audience there. I'm just going to select these people of that kind of age category there. And again, we try and get every answer back within a couple of seconds to make it nice and it feels like something you're playing with, and it's kind of fun rather than waiting around and having to take a coffee. Okay, so we've got this audience here. No kids in the household. They're of this kind of age, 25 to 45, and they're looking at family and parenting content. Let's look at what else they're interested in online. Obviously, family and parenting index is very highly because that's what we selected in terms of our audience. The next highest indexed thing is relationships, and particularly inside relationships, we've got weddings. Okay, so there might be some shotgun weddings happening here, who knows? And we can also look at things like what are the other topics they're looking at. This is very much an alpha, so this takes longer than a few seconds to come back. But I think this will give us some insight again into that audience. This is all about starting with a massive data set and honing in to get more intuition. And it allows me as a marketer to kind of put some sort of theory behind it. And quickly I can see, I get it now. There's a lot of pregnancy stuff and baby name stuff here, right? So again, if I'm doing some sponsored content with one of these kind of publications that does a lot of parenting content, there seems to be this really interesting, fairly sizable audience of people who are reading that content while they're either trying or expecting a baby. Okay, so this is what I mean by getting beyond the aggregate information, an interactive engine, an interactive kind of compute engine that's easy enough to use, that allows me to kind of play with all this kind of data and kind of get some sort of deeper marketing understanding, some sort of understanding into audiences. We can do exactly the same kind of stuff with, I'll take off some of these filters now, like that. We could do exactly the same with our own kind of, your own first party data. So let's say we want to know what's true about, I don't know what, I've left a queer filter on there, apologies for that. Let's get rid of all of those. I'm back up to the entire internet population right now. In this case, I'm going to look for, this is people who've looked at the Quantcast blog, right? So not many people. It's not the best blog out there, or not the most popular, but actually it is the greatest blog out there. It's just people haven't heard of it yet, honestly, trust me. We can look at people who are looking at the Quantcast blog here. Obviously, there's a young bias, educated bias, well-paid people, male bias. This is probably because we use our blog a lot for recruiting, so there's a lot of engineering content on there. Even though only 1,400, 1,500 people have looked at it over the last month or so. We can look at other things like keywords associated with people who are visiting our blog. So what other topics are people looking at associated with our blog? This will take a few seconds to come back. But again, what I'm looking for here is some sort of intuition. I've got so a lot of artificial intelligence, some ultimate list. This one here is really interesting. Model 3, why are people looking at Tesla Model 3? Well, I can tell you, we sponsored a conference where they were giving away a Tesla Model 3 as a prize to attendees. Clearly, people who kind of were aware of that have somehow come and visited our blog. That's telling me that our marketing team are probably doing the right kinds of things, at least in the upper funnel activity. Right, so again, there's a lot of uses for this, as long as you can use it directly as a marketer. It's interactive, so you can get beyond the aggregate information, and you can drill in and kind of test your own hypotheses. We've also built a whole bunch of other cool stuff into here, so that we can do things like comparing and contrasting. So if I want to compare two different audiences, this can be what's true about people who bought one product or another product, or people who are engaged in 3 product pages and not checked out, versus people who were homepage bouncers, versus people who went ahead and purchased or became like high lifetime value. We could do. I've got a couple of audiences here. I've got PlayStation, and I think I created one for Nintendo Switch. There we go. I'm going to run a comparison report there. This is the same information, the same query engine, everything else, but just visualized in a way that makes sense for comparisons. So we can start to do things like over here, I'm going to do things like I'm going to look at age. Where's age on here? And I'm just going to highlight the differences like that. And we can see that the biggest difference between PlayStation, people who are reviewing PlayStation content and Nintendo Switch content is this younger crowd, this 18 to 20-year-old crowd, much more likely to be into Nintendo Switch. If I was Sony, I would care about this right now. That's your future audience. If I was Nintendo, I would be worried about this. This would play directly into my marketing right now. So getting this sort of intuition kind of freely and easily in an interactive fashion, I think is really important. So I'm going to go back to my slides, which weren't working. I'm going to stop this share. Okay. I'm having so many issues with slides. I'm just going to leave it on that last one. We do have some kind of pre-built kind of insights in a number of verticals. If you're interested in those, please go to quantcast.com/insights. You can download these packs. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If you've got any more questions about this or anything else, please do reach out to us. If you want to have some more kind of vertical insights and stuff, go to quantcast.com/insights. If you want to get early access to our platform, get in touch. Thank you, everyone. Have a great